So you want to learn how to paint your Xbox One controller, something completely customized, something unmistakably yours. Well, that's what I do. Thank you for checking out the tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know in order to make your very own custom controller. Yes, that's right, the benefits of clicking on that thumbnail are starting to happen. There I am. You see me standing there with the glorious controller in my hand, the light of heaven shining down upon me, flowing through my long, beautiful, blowing hair. Are you ready to start the tutorial? Are you ready to learn? Good, because I'm ready to teach. Now things are about to get sexy, so try to keep your hands out of my pants. I'd appreciate it. Welcome to my tutorial. Feel free to navigate the tutorial at any time using the menu by clicking on my logo in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Whether it's the last step you left off on or the next step that you need to finish, the menu is always here available for you. If you are using a mobile device, I apologize, the menu is not available. However, if you look in the description of the video, you will find a menu for you there. We're going to head over to the auto store, someplace like O'Reilly or someplace like AutoZone, to get our Duplicolor paint. I used gloss black and gray metallic as well as an acrylic lacquer clear coat. I also used sandable primer, and I picked up some extra buttons from duckycustoms.com over on eBay. A link in the description will be provided. You want to get yourself some painter's tape, a T8 and a T6 security screwdriver, scissors, and 400 grit sandpaper. So the first thing we want to do, in case you haven't done it, is we're going to flip over this controller and we're going to go ahead and pull the batteries out. Really super easy. You got to make sure to get those out of the way first. Then we're going to use a small flathead screwdriver up here at the trigger, slightly twisting the bottom area of the grip and working ourselves a little gap in here that we can get our thumbs into, and continue to work our flathead screwdriver down until you hear a pop. You can also grab a hold of it by the side like this and just pull on it. They will pop out. If it's a controller that you haven't ever opened before, it will make some popping sounds. Don't worry, you're not breaking anything. It actually comes off quite easily. You don't even really need the flathead screwdriver for this, but if you don't want to break fingernails or anything like that, I suggest to use it. Now underneath of this sticker is our first security screw. We're going to go ahead and pop through that and remove that first. Now we're going to move on to the other 4 screws, which are located in this area. We have one here, and another one over in this area. So we're going to go ahead and remove that, and I'm going to shut up while we do that because I love this song. Once we have our screws removed, we can just grab the bottom part of the shell and pull it right off. Make sure to put those screws someplace safe so we can reattach them later. And to pull off the D-pad, you're going to grab the bottom part of the ring and pry it upwards, and then just dump out your D-pad. Extremely, extremely easy. Now we're going to remove these 5 screws with our smaller Torx screwdriver. First, we're going to remove these first. And I did have a little bit of resistance from a couple of them, and I'll show you what I did to get those out of there, just in case you run into that problem. Now we want to remove our left and right bumpers. You will put your fingers basically on the areas that they connect to the controller, kind of pull them out and then lift upwards, and they will come off. Then you can remove this covering that surrounds your home button by lifting it up on this area here. There are 2 tabs. You pull it up and then pull it back. It will come right off. Now we're going to move to the triggers, and the triggers are actually one of these screws gave me a lot of problems. This one here in particular, this is me discovering that that screw doesn't want to come out. So I'm just going to move on to the other screws. You have 2 screws in each trigger, and you're going to be using your smaller Torx screwdriver to remove those screws. It really just did not want to come out of there. So I'm moving on, and there are 3 screws in this location here that are holding the bottom of the controller board, I guess we'll call it. You want to pull those out so that way you can get to the buttons. This is another screw that gave me trouble, which also worried me since it was attached to a motherboard, if you will, a controller board. So what I did was I ground off the tops of these screws using a small sanding stone for a Dremel. Not before putting on my safety glasses, because safety first, everybody. So I just wore down the top of the screw and just kept working at it, and I tried again periodically just to see if that would help, but it did not help me get a better grip on it. So I ended up just grinding it down completely, being careful not to destroy the plastic. The plastic will heat up, and it's possible that it will get so hot around that screw that it will melt, and that's kind of what happened, but it didn't destroy anything. I was able to put a screw back into it later. Now, when I did it on this part, this screw here, I did it from a different angle. As you can see, I went straight down on it, and you can't really see it, but I just did the same thing. I ground it off completely, being extremely careful not to grind into the actual PCB board that it was attached to. It took me a little bit to figure out how to get it off of there, but as you can see, I was able to remove it. You have a few more screws to remove on this PCB board here underneath of the top PCB board. So in order to get that to have a little bit more slack, I chose to remove the rumble, basically just kind of like pull it away so that way I can pull this thing further back and get in there to where those screws were. And once you get that, I mean, it really helps. It's the best way to get this thing pulled apart without having to remove the rumbles. You have a screw in here next to the B buttons pad, so we're going to remove that one. And you have one on the opposite side, kind of close to the bottom. If you're not looking carefully enough, you can miss these, so if you go to pull out your controller innards and they won't remove, take another look, make sure that you're not missing any screws. You know, maybe you missed, maybe overlooked one or whatever. More than likely that's what's going to happen, because if it's not pulling out extremely easy, you're still secured to the plastic somewhere. Now you can get under here and remove the button padding, and then just remove your buttons. Super, super simple. Sanding is by far one of the most arguably important parts of painting your project. It is important. Do not ask me if you can skip sanding, because no. The answer is no. You're going to sand. You're going to sand and you're going to like it. Do you understand me? Oh, you don't like that comment? Well, guess what? You can get out, because this tutorial isn't for you. This tutorial is for winners, not people who take shortcuts. Okay? Okay. I'm actually going to give you a side-by-side comparison. So what exactly what it looks like. It doesn't really take very much work. As you can see, even though in fast time it really was just a few minutes, all you have to do is just make the plastic look matte. So I'm going to give you a side-by-side here. The left side is not sanded, the right side is sanded. It's super easy, doesn't take much to do all that.
Alright, so let's talk about how you're going to paint, like the approach that you take when it comes to painting, the actual technique that we need to think about while we're doing this. So I'm using a piece of paper here, and this was explained best by a guy named Tony D, who does a lot of really cool spray painting techniques and stuff. Check him out on YouTube. He's definitely got a lot of really cool tips and tutorials that I haven't shared with you. But this is what we need to think about when we're painting, okay? So what you want to do is when you have a hold of your paint, the first thing that we need to do is clear out the nozzle, okay? So you'll set it off to the side, and you'll, just like that, just to make sure that it's all going. And then what we're going to do is, if the project is here, we start spraying over here, okay? So it'll be on, and then you'll go across and let off, okay? And then back on, and then move across your project, okay? You don't want to start here in the middle and little bitties and doing it like this. You want to go on, you understand? And so I'll leave the audio up in the actual video so you can actually kind of hear how the paint goes. But what this does is, if your project is here, okay, it's like a crazy little eye. This is project. So you want to start spraying over here and work your way across. If you start in here or whatever, you'll start to get a crazy little face guy there. You'll get like build up on the areas over here, which I guess is called a barbell effect, and we don't want that. You want smooth layers of paint across the whole thing. So once again, when you're painting, it's on, across, off, on, across, off. Okay? Hope that helps. Another thing that you want to do is you want to get yourself a cup of some sort, or some way of a container, some sort of a container that you can put hot water in, and then you put your paint inside of it, and you let the paint heat up. Okay? The reason why you do this is because it makes the paint easier and flow easier, rather, across your project. I recommend doing it. I haven't said that in the last tutorials, mostly just because a lot of people don't want to take the extra time and wait. But if you really want excellent results, especially when you're using duplicolor paint, I suggest putting it in warm water, and then what you'll do is you'll let it sit there for a little, like about 5 minutes or so. You take it out and you shake it up, and if the can kind of cools down, you need to put it back inside of here and let it heat up for another 5-10 minutes or whatever. Take it out, and then you shake it out. Also, when you shake it off, make sure you do it away from your project, okay? You don't want to get water all over your project and then go in there and start spraying paint, because obviously if we have water in there, it's going to cause problems. So avoid that. And I hope that helps you out. I definitely try to include new information in these videos, so hopefully you learn something there about the paint and how to go about using it.
So now we're using primer, and we're just lightly putting it on using the techniques that I showed you before. And I'm leaving the audio up so you can actually hear me talking to my kitty cat. No, it's just so you can kind of get a better idea of how much you're using on this. That's it right there. That's all the primer we're going to put on this. So now this is our first coat of paint. And very, very quickly and very, very lightly, we're going to add paint to this project. This is our second coat of paint, and we're going to make this coat almost wet looking. So you don't want it to be super glossy and shining light from above. It's okay if there's a little bit of a reflection, but you don't want it to be like glistening, you know. And we're also allowing 15 minutes of dry time in between each coat. When we go to do our third coat, we actually want it to look wet. So you'll basically do your third coat the same way that I'm doing my second coat here. In another video, I did what's called well, I'm not sure really what you'd call it. I just basically used painter's tape to cut out a really cool design. And if you want to learn how to do that, you can learn in my other tutorial where I did the Xbox to match this controller. And very, very cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to lightly add one, it's not even a coat, I'm just lightly dusting the gray metallic paint over the top of this. You can see I'm not directly applying it to the controller. I'm painting over the controller and allowing the paint to kind of fall into place where I want it. So I'm taking time to kind of look at it, make sure that it's not getting in places that I don't want it to be, and, you know, just kind of being extra attentive here. Lightly bursting it on, not piling it on there, and this is the only coat of this that we're going to put down. I'm going from above here and lightly going across so that way I can get the area right above where your bumpers are. Very, very, very simple. And what we're going to do is we're immediately going to remove the decal that we placed and reveal our new Batman controller here. It's starting to look pretty cool, right? So we're going to let that dry for about half an hour, and then we're going to hit it with some clear coat. Alright, once again, allowing the audio to play so you can hear exactly how much I'm using. And remember, you want to heat up your paints before you're doing this. You can see how much of a cloud comes out. That's because the paint is nice and warm. Now this is our first coat, as I've mentioned, and it's extremely fast. Basically following the same rules that we did when we painted the controller. Just super quick. You don't want to put a whole lot on here. You don't want it to be glossy at all. You don't want any of that. Now we're going to let it dry for about 15 minutes. Here's our second coat. We're going to make this one look almost wet, just as I mentioned before. You don't want it to be super glossy. You just want it to look like, you know, it's kind of getting there. When we do it this way, we're adding 3 coats. These 3 coats build up, and that way, you know, you're not getting too much. You don't risk dripping. You don't risk wrinkles in your top coat and stuff like that and completely ruining it and having to go over it with sandpaper and do it all over again. These are things we want to avoid. So just make sure to take your time when you're doing this. Don't get, you know, antsy. Oh, I'm just going to do it all at once because I don't want to wait any longer. Good things come to those who wait. Alright, so I mentioned our third coat is going to be the coat that is nice and glossy. It is okay for this coat to glisten, if you will. You want it to reflect the light and you want it to look wet. You don't want it to be dripping wet. You want it to look just get it to the point where it glosses. Then you're finished with that. Make sure to, you know, spin it while you're doing all this. That way you get complete coverage over the entire project. I had a little bit of dust in there, just one small hair. Lucky enough I spotted it now. If something like that happens to you, You can sand it out a little later and then just reapply some more clear coat to it. So now it is time to reassemble. We have to do this in kind of a specific way. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull everything out to where it's completely bare here. And we're going to start by locating our buttons, making sure that we've got everything ready for us. We got it all right here. Now, as you can see, I've got the original buttons that I had and then the new buttons. These buttons here actually have like the X, Y, A, and B in them. So we're going to find the specific holes that those go into. Those buttons will only fit in their designated holes, so it is impossible for you to mess this part up. Just touching it with my fingers, just giving a little finger action there. So here is our custom home button by Buffy the Slayer Mods. They are an excellent group of people. They are on eBay, and I will give you a link in the description to where you can go and find one yourself. I believe they'll even make you a custom one. It might be a little bit more expensive to do a custom order, but they do phenomenal work. Once we have all of our buttons into place, we're going to go ahead and put our button pad back into place, and we can start, putting some things back together here. One thing that we need to do is we're going to put this this bottom piece here. We're just going to kind of look at it, make sure that all the buttons, I'm just looking at it, giving it some admiration. We're going to screw in our screws now. We're going to start putting everything back together where we pulled out these screws from before. And if you remember, I had one screw in the in this area here that I had to completely grind off, and it's really not a big deal if your controller, when you're putting it back together, if you're missing a screw or two, as long as everything sits securely where it is with the screws that you have, you're going to be just fine. Now we have to put our thumbsticks in kind of specifically. So the first thumbstick that you saw in position, you have to put that one in first, and then you put in the second one. Otherwise, your controller won't close up. Now we're going to put our D-pad back into place, and the left, right, and top part of the D-pads have plastic that kind of stick out. That's how you know where that goes. The one on the bottom does not have that extra piece of plastic. So remove the ring, put your D-pad in, then put the ring back over the top of that. Then we can start screwing in this part of the controller, this PCB board, back into place. And again, as I mentioned before, it's not really that big of a deal if you miss a few screws here, but you really want to make sure that you get them, that it gets secure, that it's not going to be wiggling around inside. Now we put our rumblers back into position. And this is important. I believe it's the flat side out that you want. If you want to have a little extra rumble when you put this together, just put them in backwards. It still fits, and the rumbles are a little bit more rumbly. They kind of rumble a little harder, and it doesn't use any more power. So if that's something that you would like to have, that's how you do that. You just put it in basically flat side down. Make sure to feed your wire back into position. There are little bitty grooves that this wire fits into, and it is important that you get that put back together correctly. And you don't want to have too much slack at the top, because you will risk your trigger and your bumper kind of moving together. It'll stick. It'll get in the way. So make sure that you have no slack at the top of it. All of your slack is kind of taken care of with inside the grooves. It's kind of pulled back to where, it's not tight, but you don't want extra wire hanging out at the top of it. So you have to put this piece back into position before you put your bumpers back in, and you just kind of feed it down inside. And this part can be a little tricky. Don't worry, it is correct. And if you notice that your bumper and your trigger might be, kind of rubbing against each other, Just make sure that the screws in the trigger are all the way tight. Now, while working on all of this, one of my rumblers came disconnected. This can happen to you. What I did was I used the opposite rumbler as a reference to find out where that wire goes. There's a small pad here that you can just connect it to with solder. Now it's time to put this thing back together. So we put the innards into the bottom, pull down on your triggers, and it will fall into place. You'll hear it and feel it kind of fall into place. Snap into place, if you will. Now we can put the top piece back into position, and we can begin putting our screws back into place from where we removed them. Before I put everything back together completely, I just want to make sure that it powers on. You can see that it does. So we're going to go ahead and put our covers back into place from the grips that we removed at the very beginning of our project. Nothing more than just snapping them into place. It's that easy. This whole project is super easy. It only took me about 2 days to do this. The wait was mostly just waiting for things to show up in the mail. But guys, the biggest thing when you're doing this is just waiting for paint to dry and waiting for stuff to show up. So get your prep all ready before you go to do this. You don't want to like start on it and not have everything you need and then just be completely screwed without a controller for however many weeks. And you'd be mad at me as if I did something wrong. It wasn't me, it was you. You weren't prepared. No, you were prepared. That's what this video is all about. And if you haven't seen the Xbox One tutorial that I did that matches this controller, you can check that out on my do-it-yourself playlist on my channel. Make sure to hit subscribe and check me out on Twitter. Follow me there, giving me your pictures of whatever projects you have made using my tutorials. I also have a Facebook. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/drumblanket1. Yes, facebook.com/drumblanket1. I really do appreciate you guys checking out the tutorial. It means a whole lot to me, so much to me, I just don't think you'll ever understand. And I really appreciate it when you guys give me a like, because it lets me know that you enjoyed the tutorial, that you learned something, that I'm teaching you something new. Be sure to check out drumblanket.com and look at some custom consoles and controllers that my fans have done using my tutorials. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.